政權，聲音有價，請持續支持 MyRadio 節目月費計劃。
普羅政治，民聲起義。MyRadio 2015。
家在海外，心繫香港，百川匯聚，四海文集。堅守西方價值，捍衛自由主義。西方論壇。Welcome to a very special edition of The Forum. This is a joint radio program of MyRadio.hk and diasporaconnection.org. My name is Sai Chung.
I'm Ket.
Great to have your company today. It's the 6th of June 2015 and hope you're having a wonderful day. Now, this is the first program ever on MyRadio and Diaspora Connection to be broadcast in English. So that's why we'll have a lot of audience that has never heard our programs before. So just a quick brief. Both these stations have the goal of achieving democracy in Hong Kong. And the reason for this particular show is that I've been asked by the chief editor of the program to conduct an interview with a very special guest who joins us today. Now, I'm sure you've heard about him because this thing that he started has made headlines all around the world. Nick Folkes is the chairperson of a small Australian political group, the Party for Freedom. And this group has made the headlines when they distributed allegedly racist pamphlets all over Sydney. And recently, they held a protest outside the Chinese Consulate in Sydney where the Chinese flag was burnt. Now, this group has done this in response to Chinese investors driving up prices in the Australian property market and forcing Australians out of the Australian dream of having their own property. And Mr. Folkes join us today. Good to have your company.
Thank you very much for having me on the program. Thank you.
So you've certainly caused a lot of controversy.
Absolutely, and that's the intention of the campaign, is to cause as much controversy as possible. And burning a flag of any nation is very controversial. And we also burnt flags of the Liberal, Labor and Greens Party. And
I was going to say this, you were very diplomatic with your flag burning.
Absolutely, very diplomatic. And that's the thing, we didn't want to sort of like just... It's not about hatred, it's not about just singling out the Chinese government or Chinese investors. At the end of the day, they're the symptom and the causation is the Australian government.
Okay.
And they're not upholding the laws. The Australian government, we do have laws in place and they're not upholding them, and it's a real shame because the asset bubble in Australia at the moment in residential property is out of control.
So if you're not singling out the, I guess Chinese investors and really you're blaming the Australian government, why is it that you went to the Chinese consulate and have this pamphlet all over Sydney with a big Chinese flag with a soldier running towards Australia with a big gun?
Well, the Australian government doesn't care about what I have to say or what other Australians have to say. And
you're hoping the Chinese government could step in?
Well, no, I wish that they would. I wish I could appeal to their senses, but I don't think I can, sort of thing, or our party can. But it was all about creating awareness. We want to have awareness out there, get discussion on this issue, and it's a big issue. Foreign ownership is massive, and most Australians don't support foreign ownership, and the campaign's not directed towards Australians of Chinese background, or for anyone who's a citizen or a resident, people that love this country and reside here, or citizens. It's against foreign nationals who are buying up property, and the figures even just recently came out that 23% of property, residential property in New South Wales is being bought by Chinese nationals. So it's a massive impact on the housing market. As we know, the cost of property in New South Wales, in Sydney, is $914,000 for a median price of a home. That's just, it's unaffordable. It's out of control.
I guess one of the very natural questions that we might ask is, I understand your point about, foreign national ownership of Australian property and assets.
Yes.
So why is it that Chinese people is being singled out in your campaign? Because I know you're saying they're not being singled out, but obviously it is. So why the focus on Chinese investors is my question.
And the thing is that the front of the flyer sort of thing, the very graphic image, it's very confrontational, and it was designed to sort of have maximum impact. And it's a Japanese soldier, 1942. What Japan didn't take, it's an analogy. What Japan didn't take in 1942, China will take with money today. And
so it's obviously like a wartime propaganda kind of thing.
It is. Well, it's probably it's
wartime posters and promotional material.
It's truth. And those sort of graphic images do get attention. It was used in the Second World War in Australia by the Menzies and Curtin government to bring up that patriotic feel. And you've got to protect your assets. China protects its assets. A lot of Asian countries have the right idea when it comes to protecting industry and assets. Australia's lost the ball, sort of dropped the ball, sort of thing. And it's a massive issue.
Is there a difference between Japanese people expanding its imperialism and killing millions in the rape of Nanking and also bombing Darwin? Is there a difference between that and Chinese investors purchasing property in roads?
Well, like I said, it's an analogy, and that was the sort of point that we're making. And it's created fantastic sort of awareness. It's gone around the globe.
But do you think the two events can be compared with? Because
absolutely. You look, I come from a Russian refugee family. My parents, my mum was actually born in Shanghai. Her parents were living in Manchuria when the Japanese attacked and were living there, and they had to escape. So I'm well aware of what was going on in China in those days, and it was a terrible time. But it was the analogy, and it's an economic war. And it's sort of like, I hope it doesn't come to a physical war. But when you have an environment where you're putting two different entities together, a massive sort of 1.4 billion Chinese sort of thing that have got, there's a lot of people who have purchasing power. 10 million of them expressed an interest to buy property in Australia on that website Juwai. It is a real economic war, and Australia is losing.
So why the focus on China? You still haven't answered that.
Well, China's the biggest market. China's the biggest market for foreign ownership of residential property in Australia. Right across the board, America's still number one foreign investor in Australia. But when it comes to residential property, and we live in a globalised world, I understand that
because obviously if
property, it's different.
Yeah, obviously if like Americans invested into Apple and having an Apple store in Sydney City, it's very different from Chinese investors buying the apartment next to mine, and the impact is much less.
Absolutely.
They create some jobs.
Okay, so I see what you're saying, Nick. So what you're saying is
impact. Americans aren't coming here in droves, and the truth is, it's a very sort of confrontational subject to sort of talk about. People coming in, the demographics of Australia changing, and especially in Sydney, locals being priced out, and that's the truth. And I don't know how to package it in such a way. If we're going to be sort of politically correct, we wouldn't get the attention that is needed on this important issue.
That's true, because if you were politically correct, you wouldn't be speaking with us today, because I would never have heard of you. Well, I guess one thing that everybody has to agree with is the power and impact of the Chinese purchaser. So make of that what you will. It can be a positive thing, because a lot of Chinese people are seeing this in a very positive light. They say, look, we're buying all your properties. See how rich we are. Now we have to respect us. So there's that mentality. But of course, there are other people who say that you're buying a lot of Australian property and you're pricing people out. And the fact is, a lot of these properties are focused to the Chinese market. I don't think anybody can disagree with that. You just need to go to any Chinese in fact, you can go to any suburb, and you would see a lot of the real estate agents would have their pamphlets and flyers and newspapers and magazines, and it's all in Chinese. If you go to roads, a lot of the new buildings up there, and not just in roads, in a lot of places, you don't have level 4, you don't have level 14. Obviously, they're not built for white people, because for white people, you won't have level 6 and level 13. Right. So obviously these are for Chinese people. I was just reading in the Telegraph this week that there's a $1 billion Chinese investment boom in the Central Coast. The Central Coast. And there's a record price of $3.4 million at a Mount White property. And the local agent there said that out of 14 potential buyers, 11 were of Asian descent. And in Kellyville, Kellyville, if you don't, live in Sydney, Australia, is basically like, 10 years ago, it's all farms. It's like nothing. If you want to live in Kellyville, you want to live in a very big house and away from the smokes. That's what you want to do. But they're going to be building a 41-meter high apartment block there. It's very not Kellyville. It's very not Kellyville. And I came from the hills, and that's one of the things I like about the hills. Really tall trees. You've got big grass plains. You don't want to see a big block of apartments. That's not what you want to see. So I'm certain that in terms of like the facts, this is something that we can't deny. It's the fact that Chinese people are really making an impact in the Australian housing market. The question is this a good thing or a bad thing? Because of course our treasurer would say Australia is open for business. We're getting lots of money from investors. Hey, and people with property, their house prices are rising. So a lot of people are actually very happy about this. So
there are people that are happy about it.
So what's wrong with this? And I think this is a point where Kat can come in, because Kat here works in the social sector, and he does see a lot of things that happens. He sees what happens when Chinese people come to buy Australian properties. Look, my question is this. Australia, we're a very open multicultural society, so a lot of people want to come to Australia to find a good life for themselves. Do we have, is the fact this, there's a lot of Chinese people who want to come to Australia, they want a good life for themselves and the children, and they're ready to take up the Australian way of life, and they're just buying a house. There's a lot of them, but they're just buying a house that they want to live in to have a good life. Is that the situation or not?
There's something far more beyond that, because you can be surprised at some of the people that come here, they buy the house, they never see the house. They never visit the house. And then what for then?
That's true.
Yes. But why they spend millions of dollars without looking at the wall? What is it? And then I think it's because it is a mean of they transferring their wealth and money to here.
Okay.
Yeah, because in China, there's not very it's not very stable in the political. So there's still some political battling or wrestling in the government in there, and it doesn't give a very secure future. That any movement can change the total situation, and the people that they got money in the bank or they got houses, it's not secure.
Okay, so you're saying, for example, I'm a government official, and I won't talk about corruption here, but you're saying, for example, if something happens, if there's like a political situation that affected me or my bosses, I can just lose everything. I can lose
everything, and you got no argument, you got no debate, because this is a one party, and then there's not.
I see China as a very high prosecution rate.
That's right. So, and the law doesn't protect people; it just protect the rulers.
So what you're saying is, in that case, that's something very reasonable. So it's not like they want to come in and take you over. It's really just a very reasonable self-interest thing, right?
Yes.
So for example, I'm like a rich person in China. I don't know whether or not someday all of this will be gone. So I need to transfer my wealth to a safe economy like Australia.
Australia is a very good choice, because we are very free economic, and there's a free and very secure country. Everybody here, we got secured by the government, by the constitution, and we are safe. We feel very safe here. We live here, we're really safe, with money or whatever, properties or possessions. And then so what they do is that they, instead of digging a hole in the ground to hide their pleasure, they find another place. They come to and dig the backyard in a house.
Okay.
And so they transfer all the money here. And then because they have to transfer huge money, because all the monies, all the coins, all the wealth in China, it could be wiped out, anything. It's not secured. So what they want to secure is to put every coins into our country here.
Okay.
And so this is
the problem still exists in China too.
They're not last resort, because the property, because it involves a huge amount of transaction of money, and so that means the property market is their choice, where they can do with one single transaction, they can bring huge money there. So this is one of the reasons why.
So what do they do? What's the process of transferring funds from Hong Kong? From China to Australia. What's the process? Like, how do you do that? For example, if I'm a rich Chinese person wanting to transfer money into Australia, and I want to transfer $10 million, say, like how does that work? How do I do this?
Because from the property market, because I can buy house and the properties and the market and
So I just buy $10 million house.
And also because it's a Chinese traditional, because people they love bricks and walls and everything. Because they think this is really secure, because they are so empty on the show. they need to something on the hand, something that they can look
Touch,
at,
yeah, something physical.
Yeah, so
yep.
that means, something really.
So have you seen or have you witnessed any situations where people have tried to transfer a lot of money into Australia through the property market?
Yes. There's a lot of people. They buy a lot of house and properties here because the purpose is they want to transfer a lot of money here, and they try to use the property purchase, the property buying, and then they want to so that they can transfer a lot of money. So because the property, I can buy a house and I can even buy a very high price, so I can bring a lot of money to here. For example, if I give you something, one of a case in my experience, that if people selling at 1 million, I don't mind to pay 2 million.
Okay.
Because if I buy million, the rest of the million I have to stay.
Okay, well, do these Chinese investors or owners, do they realise that there's a feeling in Australia that's sort of growing, opposing that? Do they?
I want. Sorry, I'm so sorry, Nick. I want to hear this story because it sounds interesting. So back to your story. So there is this $1 million property for sale, but the person would be willing to pay $2 million for this property.
Yes, because so I can bring all my cash here. If I want million, I left half in China, and that's not secure, and then I don't feel safe.
So what happens then?
So what like they say, I'm willing to pay 2 million instead of 1 million.
Okay.
Bargain, and then I pay 2 million. And then of course I have some secret deal, and then so that means for the extra 1 million, that means maybe I get 80%, you get 20%.
Okay.
It's a win-win situation for me and the seller.
So if I'm the vendor, I own the $1 million property. It's only worth $1 million, and most people would just buy $1 million. You would say, hey, I'll pay $2 million for it.
Yes.
But in fact, when I get the $2 million, I give you $800,000 back, and I get $200,000 extra. Is that what you're saying?
This is a win. Just if we look at the security between us, it's a win-win situation. But what about the other competitors on the market? They rush out. It's not fair.
The market's distorted.
And this deal is not open. It's not open. Okay, if it's an open deal that everybody can follow and do, it's fair. But now it's some under the table or something. That's not fair for the other people. Okay, I pay you $20. I can easily get it from China. I don't know you because I've got ways. But in here, the local people, we work hard. We save dollars. A dollar by a dollar, right? So that means it's unfair.
Because for them, they really don't care about the they really don't care about the price. Yeah,
it's easy for them.
And they can actually create a market as well, because if they spend $5 million on this, the other properties might also rise in price, and they'll benefit in the long run anyway.
Just bring in. There's a good reason and there's a good cause for them to bring more money in. Money in. Yeah, if the price go higher, they can bring more money in. But it's not fair to the local people.
That can't be good. That can't be good.
It's not good for the local people, right? For the real buyers, they're not good.
Yeah. Okay. So next, sorry, you were going to say?
Chinese sort of wanting to protect their assets and that sort of thing, and wanting to protect their money, but it's having a devastating effect on the Australian people. And
it's not our responsibility to protect the assets of Chinese people.
There needs to be reforms in the courts and in the financial markets, and it's just it's not our responsibility, but it is becoming that. You know what I mean? Because now that with all this sort of investment from overseas, especially from China, people just can't compete, and it's just distorting the market. And already this week, with the sort of after having the protests, there's been a lot of publicity, but there's been a lot of negative news in about the property market and also banks over lending. So we've got this economy, a crap economy built on sort of
I think banks over lending might be another issue, because obviously these purchases we're talking about aren't people who need to borrow money. So I think it's important for everybody to be focused on the issues.
They are borrowing money because they're trying to get a foothold in the market. Yeah, absolutely. And there's an agency, Monica too, and she's got an agency called Black Diamond Concierge. And she says that, look, we're a one-stop shop. This is not just property purchase. This is migration, legal matters. We can help you out with your schools. It's everything. So, it's just sort of like buying property for a lot of mainlanders too is a visa lounge to migration.
Sure. So Nick, can you tell us what you're trying to achieve with this campaign? So obviously, was it last week you went to the Chinese consulate?
That's right. We had the protest out in front of the Chinese consulate.
So can you tell us a bit about it? Because both of you were there. I wasn't, but
it
it
was quite a successful one, and then because we can bring our voices, and then the public can hear very clearly.
Yeah, I was hearing that previously there were getting hundreds of people, but only a dozen two doesn't show up. So is
I
that
can explain that. Yeah,
is that campaign unsuccessful?
No, not at all. The media attention's been fantastic, and there's been ongoing discussion about foreign ownership in Australia. But we had a protest page, an event page on Facebook, and it just got out of control. The sort of the comments on there were just abusive, and they weren't about the issue. And it was an open page, I believe, in full democracy, but people had a lot of Chinese students on there getting their other friends to sign it, and it just got out of control, and I was getting death threats and people calling me up. And so we took it down and made it a private page because I just couldn't sit there all day just deleting comments. And, you know, the dynamics of the protest changed too. I got a phone call from police in the morning, and they said, look, the anarchists are going to be there, and wherever we go, these so-called anarchists turn up, sort of thing, because they like to sort of be obnoxious. But everything changed where, you know, both ends of the street were cordoned off. We had to access the protest area from the other end. There was a petition in the middle. So we had about 30 people there, which was quite productive, and a lot of people couldn't get through. So that was sort of like, you know, held numbers back. But the most important thing was just getting that message out there and being targeted, and that's what we achieved, and I'm grateful that we're able to do that.
I also read that because of the Chinese, they can pay dollars for the student come to rally against us. They try to make it as a confrontation, or maybe a wrestling around the street. On the street, and then they try to distract the attention from the media. If people just keep shouting or just confrontation, then the media will concentrate on reporting about what's happening in the venue or whatever there, and that we may have enough time to talk about our words, and then so this is we make a very good judgment.
So you're saying that on the day you did get the message out rather than the message of we had a fight.
Yes. Some people they can pay to ruin our.
Yeah. Well, that's what they're trying to do, and apparently it's been very successful in the past.
So that it's very smart to make some.
Yep. And the thing is too, like in April we had a protest out at Fairfield Showground, Australia's first halal expo. We went out there because we oppose halal and cruelty to animals sort of thing, and it got out of hand there, and we got attacked, and it was sort of witnessed on TV, and there's a police investigation. So we're about, you know, it's not just about foreign ownership, it's a cross-section of issues sort of thing, and when we hold a protest, great way to get attention, and we get that sort of a counter-protest, and we never... Our intention is never to have violence. We want to get the message out there and be constructive about it. But our opponents descends into violence, and it's just the way it is.
Okay. Well, I think you've made your point. And thanks so much, Kat, because we're just going to have a swap over here with Jeff, who's going to join us in a sec. Because the reason why we're having this swap over is because I'm, Nick, not sure whether or not you'd be surprised at this, but in fact, many Asians, notably people from Hong Kong, Chinese people who very much agree with your campaign. In fact, in Hong Kong's Apple Daily newspaper, which is the city's most read newspaper, it posted the news about your event in the Consulate of China, and the subheading said, "Even the Australians have had it." You know, be assured that not everybody thinks you're racist. We're going to have a look more at that, you know, this race thing issue. But I think one thing that's really interesting for our Hong Kong and other Asian listeners. Is you know, what's the I guess the Australians' view of mainland China with the red flag and the stars compared with, say, Hong Kong people, Singaporean Chinese, Malaysian Chinese? Do you see a difference? And I think Jeff wants to expand on that one. Yeah,
because like a lot of my Hong Kong mates are very interested in.
I see Jeff is trying to. He's trying really hard, by the way, because he recently came from Canada, so he has to throw the word "mate" in. He's working very hard.
I'm trying to work it out here. So, a couple of my friends back in Canada as well as in Hong Kong as well. They just want to know if like mainstream Australians, do they know the difference distinguish between people from China, and people from Hong Kong, as well as
Taiwan, as well. Singapore, Malaysia.
Because like we're all yellow skin, and we're all like pretty much the same or visible minority.
And you know the phrase that goes, you know, all Asians look the same, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. We get confused all the time as Asians. So there's nothing wrong with that at all.
I think there's a real sort of mixed feeling across the community. You've got some people that say, "Oh yeah, all Asians look the same."
But is there a difference? Like, do people differentiate generally?
They do. Some people can, and I think they can increasingly tell. Just because there's so many Asians in Australia now, and they can see different groups living in different areas. being in different trades and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of Australians that can differentiate between different Asians, and there is people are worried about immigration right across the board, whether it's coming from any sort of country, because they're worried about the cultural impact, the economic impact. And we've got so much immigration in Australia, just like Canada sort of thing, where Australia's got the highest level of immigration per capita in the world. And where are we heading with all this immigration? I'm not opposed to immigration, but I want a constructive immigration policy that has benefits for Australia and not just benefits for other people coming in. And so, a lot of Australians can differentiate the difference. Between different Asians, and they are very.
Can you tell us how? Because I'm very interested in this.
Exactly.
So what kind of categories do you see?
Yes.
Oh, this is this, and
what kind of boxes would you tick between this guy's from Hong Kong, this guy's from China?
I know this is a very dangerous question to ask a white man, but I read in your pamphlets that you're not politically correct, so I'll let you say this. But also, you can say some people say as well. You can say some people say as a preface before you say anything.
I'm speaking, from my own sort of experiences and that. Like where my daughter goes to school, there's a lot of people from different backgrounds, and there's Asians there. There's people, Australians of Chinese background, and they speak English just like I do. And so that's a major point.
The more Asian, the more Aussies,
it's
kind of Chinese.
It's communication. And there's other people that have arrived just recently, and there's a language barrier and that sort of thing. But where I live in Balmain, Rozelle, you don't get that much immigration, and you get Asians there, of course, but a lot of them are born in Australia, so
and pretty much assimilated.
Yeah, exactly. They've assimilated. They're living in the community. They speak English. There's no language barrier.
By the way, we've got to use the word integrated in Australia.
Language barrier is a major problem for a lot of communities just coming here. And when they stick in those little communities, and there's no need to assimilate or to learn the English language, because they can access all government services in different languages, the council, they really don't need to speak English. And so we've got a parallel society.
Okay. So my question is, even if, so basically you're differentiating between, so can you differentiate between, for example, like a mainland Chinese who speaks English and a Hong Kong Chinese who speaks English and a Taiwanese Chinese who speaks Singaporean English?
Yes, I can with the fashion. The fashion that mainlanders use is a little bit different. So I can sort of distinguish that. And also, like people from Hong Kong and Singapore,
with skirts kind of thing.
Or polka dots with sort of like something else. That it's a bit of a mismatch sort of thing.
So if somebody wears a huge scarf and a big dress with Louis Vuitton written all over it, what group is this from?
Absolutely, probably from mainland China.
Okay,
but
good.
I've seen Filipinos do that too.
What about an Asian girl that you can't really tell whether or not it's a guy and a girl with thick rimmed glasses like this one and a hat, and
trying to go hipster style.
That's right. Is that where would this person be from?
Well, probably I'd say probably from Hong Kong.
I see. He knows his stuff. He knows his stuff.
He's been pointing out like the.
But the funny thing, because I lived in Japan for 1 year, and it was a very interesting experience. I lived there in the early 90s. It was the bubble days, and I saw that firsthand.
You saw that thing coming in.
Yeah, the real estate and this massive explosion of wealth on borrowed money, and money going to the stock market into real estate, and I've never seen so much wealth. And every time I go back to Japan, they had that lost decade, and I don't want to see Australia have this huge deflationary period, a lost decade, but I can, getting back to your question about different Asians, I can distinguish the difference between different Asians.
What about
behaviour and communication?
Normally, would you say people can spot that in the general community?
Because
I just want to know.
For you to do that, do you think it's easy for normal Australians?
Yes, I think it is, because there's Asian people everywhere in Australia now, and I think probably 20, 30 years ago, sort of like people just sort of put them all in the one sort of
box.
And just said,
they couldn't even differentiate between Japanese and Chinese in one stage.
That's like my days. When I was
80s.
That's
exactly right. But these days, people can notice the difference, and there's some, like Hong Kong people and Singapore people, Malaysian. They're more willing to sort of speak English. They've got sort of the fashion they wear. They seem to be a little bit more, definitely more willing to assimilate in the way that they'll live in suburbs where there's Australians. Mainland Chinese are sort of concentrating in different areas. But the massive influx of mainlanders too coming into some of these suburbs, the demographics are changing so fast because such huge numbers. You know, and they'd probably think, oh, I want to go to a school where there's Australians, and then all of a sudden, you know, all the mainlanders think like that, and all of a sudden, most of the schooling, there's a lot of schools in Sydney now that where white Australians are the minority, and not just with Asians, but also with living in the Western Sydney with Muslims, Islanders. Australia's changed tremendously over the last 30, 40 years. Yeah.
And I guess one of the interesting reasons as to why we're speaking to you today is that I guess, you know, 10, 20 years ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Immediately, Hong Kong people, Taiwanese people, whatever, if they see anything like this, oh, they said Chinese, like everybody immediately assumes it's racist. But I think the Asian the Asian community in Australia has really grown up in the last couple of years, and you know we're really starting to differentiate between what's spin and you know what's truth, and this is something that we want to have a look at today. And the reason why, as to a lot of Hong Kong listeners from my own program, I've got no personal views on this, but from my own program, agrees with a lot of things you say. And let me just give you an example. I was just reading I was just reading online today from it should be a New York Times, but it reported that there's this apartment in Hong Kong which is only 160 square feet. So if you're in Australia, you don't know what a square feet is. Basically, it's 15 meters squared. It's very small. It's very small.
That's a room.
Yeah,
cubicle.
It's a cubicle, and it's just slightly bigger than a car. Okay, that's how big it is, and it's not in like a massively expensive area facing the sea. It's not anything like that. Just a normal humble home, okay? Very humble home, in fact. And it's just sold for 650,000 Australian dollars.
Go figure.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So one of the reasons as to why Hong Kong people would listen to you and say, look, even the Aussies have had it, or yes, I agree with this guy, is the fact that they're really having it worse in Hong Kong. And of course, another issue in Hong Kong is that mainlanders, as I said, are driving up prices not just for housing but also for rent. And more seriously is that it really affects the social fabric. And I think some of it is happening in Australia. I'll talk about that in a sec. But for example, in Hong Kong, in the past, I could just go downstairs and go to my favorite cafe, for example, Hong Kong style cafe. But a lot of them have been replaced by jewelry shops or makeup and cosmetic shops and pharmacists. So gold, the reason is because they come here and buy gold. The reason is because they don't trust Chinese gold. That's why they need to go to Hong Kong. And the person who's selling the noodles or making breakfast can't be there. So you've got to go down 2 streets, and everybody is being priced out, and the price of food goes up because of a supply issue. And
but they even have protests in Hong Kong.
Absolutely, and also even for daily essentials,
mainland shoppers,
even for daily essentials. And you would have seen this in Australia as well. Chinese tourists or people who live in China, even international students, buying up milk formula for babies and shipping it over to China. Supplements, and all that. So of course, what we're seeing in Australia is just 10 times worse in Hong Kong. And if you have a baby, you can't buy formula. And it's really affecting daily life. And what's happening in Sydney is you're seeing all of these shops just popping up around the place and replacing the shops that we're used to. It's a mailing service for people in China, and basically you go in and you buy Manuka honey and milk powder, vitamins, and sheep oil, cream, QV cream, and stuff like that, and sending it off to China. They even do the sending fee, so everybody who goes in there, just has.
It's a very profitable export business.
It is,
Well, it's good to make export money, and I'm happy that people are buying Australian products and that sort of thing.
But that's replacing a lot of the
that's replacing
stores.
a lot of daily vitals that a lot of us
and and the thing is this: as an Asian, this is very, very embarrassing because I get no part of this because if I do get a part of this, I'd be I'll be going for it. I'd be very happy for that to happen. But I play no part in this.
Hong Kong, because like you said, you've got limited space.
Oh no, you can't do that in Hong Kong.
The noodle bars are gone. It's all about sort of just the changing street landscape. And like that has been in my area, but I can just imagine. But the changing street landscape is happening with people coming in.
Think of Ashfield. Think of like just on Sussex. It's changed so much.
Exactly right.
And I guess one of the things that Hong Kong people in Australia are concerned with, and they're concerned as to whether or not they should join your movement or even to speak on things like that, is that they're not part of this. They're in fact victims of this, and many can't buy their own homes. They're the victims of this, but they're concerned that regular Australians, mainstream Australians, would see them as this same group, and I guess
that's one of our largest fears.
This is the concern, and my question is this something that Hong Kong people or Malaysians or Taiwanese, even Japanese people, because Japanese people need to make a point when they go overseas that they're not Chinese these days. Should they be concerned?
They clip a badge on their backpacks and they say that they're Japanese.
That's right. In that case, and we put Australian flags as well.
Oh, for sure. So that on our backpacks.
Well, I think definitely a lot of Australians sort of, because most I think can differentiate the difference between mainlanders and that sort of thing. But they're just concerned with immigration right across the board because we've got so much immigration at the moment and so much Asian immigration. And the truth of the matter is that in another 30 to 40 years, like if you want to say white Australians will no longer be the majority population.
And North American call them white dots. Unfortunately,
exactly.
Is that a problem? Is that a problem though? So for example, do you find there's Jeff here and myself. Like I grew up in this country. I came here when I was 6. So and I'm in fact very, very conservative, much more conservative than all of my white friends. And I love this country, and I'm more patriotic than most of them. I go to Anzac Day ceremonies.
We're proud to be here.
I go to Remembrance Day ceremonies, and I even have a picture of the Queen on the wall. I'm just telling you that today, okay? Why do you mind people like me being here?
Well, it's not about you, and you're already here sort of thing. My problem is people coming in. We've got to absorb the people here, assimilate them into the community sort of thing. But when you have mass immigration, you can't do it. And it's not just Australia. It's happening in Western Europe, it's happening in Canada, it's happening in America, right across the globe, especially the Western world. And you replace the identity, you replace the culture. It'd just be like in China, for example. If millions of Africans or Australians move there, and of course they might say in a generation or two, but the culture changes because identity is culture. But there are a lot of Hong Kong people, there are a lot of Asian people who they assimilate, and they like the Western way of life.
I see many more Asians, and particularly refugees or even skilled migration people who come from a skilled migration program, who are much, much more patriotic and who are much more thankful and appreciative of what this country offers than many white people, and particularly when I went to university, I'm seeing all the green-haired Greens burning the Australian flag. I didn't see any Asians doing that. There are many more Asians and people of other races and groups that are that love this country even more than white people. So do you think that there are more traitors in your race rather than...
There are a lot of traitors, and people have been manipulated heavily by sort of ideology and also government policy. But university is not a true representation of society as a whole.
That's true, but if you look at what's being said in the media...
It's sort of thing.
But so is the media class and what's happening in education.
There's so much sort of there's so many foreign students, and Australia's got the highest penetration of foreign students in the world, so it's not a good representation of Australians and our universities too. People go to tertiary education or colleges and that sort of thing to sort of further their education. But we've got an education system in Australia that is for sale. You can go to you can get your education, and then you've got full work rights. It's just insane. We don't have enough jobs here.
Yeah, I understand this.
People on temporary visas in Australia. Australians are missing 457 exactly. There's about 1.2 million, and it's just insanity. And there are some Asians who do identify as Australians, and I want these people to speak up.
So my question is, why is this a race thing? Do you know what I'm saying? So obviously there are white people who hate this country.
Yes,
unfortunately.
And that's a fact, and that's obviously the issue. And you know, and you know what the issue is? There are a lot of these people in education, in governments, and and I'll give you my experience as well. When I was in high school and university, and when I was working, I was given a lot of pressure to hate this country.
Yes.
Because if I hate this country, I actually get benefits. For example, if at school, if something goes wrong, if I say that, it's just because the teacher's racist, the teacher, if I put a report onto that, then there needs to be like this whole interview process and things like that. My papers get remarked and things like that.
Oh,
and when I was working as well, when I was working for the Australian Chinese Community Association, which is one of the Australia's biggest Asian service suppliers, one of the things that I've discovered is how the Asian community works. Basically, if you want to be successful in the Asian community, in the Chinese community in Sydney, or really all around Australia, is to tell people that follow you, either from this organization, that hey, you know what? If you vote for me, there won't be racist. Or if you vote for me, I'll fight for you against the racists. So you have governments in cahoots with this one. Actually,
yeah. And that's cultural Marxism, and that's sort of like the the Frankfurt School of Economics and the whole sort of economic Marxism that failed in Russia and failed even in China.
Should you not?
They knew that culture was a way to destabilise the West, and this is what.
Should you be focusing, on the Chinese flag, not on the Chinese flag, but on the Australian flag? Like, should you be focusing on the people that are causing these policies to happen?
The government representatives of today do not represent the Australian flag.
So burn the Australian flag. Why aren't you burning?
As I said, they do not represent what's happening with this. As I said, this is a campaign to bring out maximum awareness, sort of thing, and to achieve that. But the Australian flag is not represented by our parliamentarians in Parliament today. They're globalists, they're economic rationalists. After we had that, a jacker came out and he attacked me and called me an idiot, and the New South Wales government condemned Party for Freedom for being racist and all this sort of nonsense. And that's a sort of environment we live in, sort of thing, that our leaders don't love this country, and there's a lot of betrayal, and they've completely betrayed, and that's what Party for Freedom is all about. We're an issues-based, patriotic party, and in time I hope to get some representation in Parliament and try and drive a better bargain. It's all about compromise.
And I think one of the things that would help you is to actually have more immigrants, and like yourself, like you're a son of a refugee, is that correct? Yeah, Russian refugee. Like you need more people on board with you who agree with you, like the Hong Kong people, many of my listeners who listen to you. But see, this is the next point that I want. Yes,
even though. We can have lots of different people from different backgrounds. The left will always call you racist. You know what I mean?
Well, I think it would be harder. I think it would be harder if, for example, you've got 4 or 5 people in your campaign. Like even if you have like a, if you have a counter protest that everybody opposite you, because all the people in the Greens, they're white people. Like you see them in the protest. Like if I'm Asian and they're white, really, you can't call me a racist.
Media, just sort of, this is a bit of a personal thing. After I did Living with the Enemy, and it was about the sort of African sort of refugee that came to Australia, and they know that my wife's Asian, and I'm still a racist. It doesn't matter, because I'm a patriot and I love my country and I'm talking about sensitive issues. They always put you in that box.
The word racism gets thrown around very easily these days.
And that's the sort of environment we live in, and I believe in protecting the Australian
No, I don't think that's healthy at all. No.
Culture and identity. And when I was in Japan,
I think we should be able to debate things without people calling each other names, because I think everything that you've talked about today, like we've had a very reasonable and level-headed conversation. So I think everything you've raised, and not just you, but Kat, who's also Asian, a lot of the points that we've raised are very educated points, and these are things that are really major issues for our country in Australia. So we should be talked about it. But what's happening is that a lot of people is just throwing the word racist around to just shut down the debate. And this
stop the conversation.
And this causes a problem for Asian people in the long term as well, which I'll talk a bit about later. But Nick, I do want to address this thing for you, because I think your movement will have more traction and people won't see you as racist if you have more people from different racial groups on board rather than white people. So that's why one of the things I'm concerned with, like for starters, is the picture of all of the white people in the background. But I want to talk about some of the materials that you're using. For example, in your campaign, I just want to talk about the real estate one. You said that real estate agents are pimps.
Yes.
So are houses prostitutes? Like
absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
how's
pimps,
that?
Look, and like you were talking about before, there are some people that are benefiting from all this sort of foreign ownership in Australia, and the property sort of market, well, the real estate agents, the pimps, are sort of like, they're benefiting massively because they're making huge commissions, and it's just been an explosion of sort of real estate agents and a lot of sort of ones that are, even in the paper, you look in the paper, seeking Mandarin or Cantonese speaking real estate agents sort of thing, so they can tailor that package towards mainland Chinese or say Hong Kong Chinese to a lesser degree. So that reality exists sort of thing, and it's just sort of there are people making money, but that doesn't mean that everybody's overall better off sort of thing. And we have
I understand that. Yeah, we've covered all that. Yes. But is pimps the right word to use?
Absolutely, they are. They're pimps. They're prostituting Australia.
Okay, but is that the right word to use to gain traction in the community?
Oh, absolutely. You know, you have to use sort of hard language sometimes, and I'm not politically correct. And when you deal with the Foreign Investment Review Board, and it's funny, the people there sort of talking, the bureaucrats, look, we have that many problems with people. We can't, dealing with real estate agents, you can't get compliance. Why would they? They're making fistful of dollars. Sort of
we understand that.
They don't want to comply with Foreign Investment Review Boards.
Yep. Yeah. But I understand that, and everything that you say here is very reasonable. But I'm talking about the kind of words that you're using. For example, you describe the fact that there are many people from Chinese descent living in Australian suburbs. Demographic genocide.
Yes.
Is that too extreme?
Demographic genocide of the Australian people, because at the core of every nation or social group, there's an identity, and you can't deny that. And that's one great thing that I learned in Japan, that they have this sort of like love of their identity. They're westernised in so many ways, but they would never trash their identity. They would never open their whole market up to the third world and say, come in and you can all be Japanese sort of thing. And you know, if you sort of change the identity of a nation, you change the culture. And genocide means a systematic and deliberate replacement of a people or an ethnic group, and Australians are being replaced. And I see three different types of Australians. There's ethnic Australians, like Anglos that came here, British subjects, established the nation. There's cultural Australians, like migrants who are assimilated, love this country. And then there's passport Australians, which applies to a lot of people that just got a passport, but they couldn't give a rat's ass about the country. They don't really care about the country. But yeah, there is an identity in the core of every nation, and you know, we matter. You know, everybody matters.
But are you sort of dividing Australia when you say this and put people in?
Australia's already divided. Australia's already divided. And
are you dividing them even more?
Talking about Asians, Australians, and white Australians, and that's a fact. There's always going to be this division in society, and multiculturalism doesn't bring people together, because multiculturalism, I don't know if you know, is based on cultural relativism, which is cultural Marxism, and it says that there's no right or wrong. Yep. There's no morality. In the way that sort of culture is all relevant and relative. It's all equal, but it's, you know, it's not. The Islamic culture is not relative here. Why is it relative in Australia? And even like if we accept even the Chinese culture sort of thing and say, well, Chinese should be able to speak their language and have their cultural traits, well, then we have a clash of sort of cultures, and that's the thing, you know, like you can't assimilate mass immigration coming into Australia. And it's cultural genocide, mate, because the Australian culture is not being taught in schools now, and I'm not blaming the Chinese, the education department and the direction the government has taken. They're sort of charted this course of we're all one big family now, we're all equal, which is a circular argument. It's rubbish. Nobody's equal, you know. We're only equal before God if you believe in God, but we're not equal in this sort of earthly environment. But yeah, you can't say that all cultures are equal. It's ridiculous, yeah. And that's what multiculturalism, that all cultures are equal, and I don't accept that argument, yeah.
But genocide, is that too strong of a word to use to describe that?
No, absolutely not.
Who is genociding who? I mean, obviously, like when you have genocide, it's one government or one group of people saying we've got to destroy this other group of people. But when it's the Australian government. Yes. Obviously, what you're complaining about, like really, in terms of like the whole concern that you have in this whole interview that we're talking about, is the failure of Australian government policy. And really, like Asians and
it is the failure,
and a lot of people are just responding to
pushing, even with the free trade agreement. There's a human component to that, and the Chinese want greater access to the market. They want to bring in, for the big project sort of thing, they want to bring in Chinese labour. So it is the Australian government, absolutely, that's a causation. But we do have pressure from offshore, and there are lobby groups. Canberra's full full of lobby groups, you know, saying, look, hear us, we'll throw you this and this sort of thing. So, you know, we can't sort of ignore that fact that there are sort of pressures from overseas saying, open up your markets, and then it's very complex. We've got, you know, global corporations and banking corporations pushing globalisation. That's just, you know, it's just sort of like insane, you know, have a free movement of goods, services and people when there's so many variables in the world, you know. Australia can't have an open market to China because there's 1.4 million to 24 million, you know, and that's systematic. It doesn't mean picking up a rifle, but it's a systematic replacement of people over time, and it's that gradual. And that's what genocide is. And you look at the United Nations, and they actually sort of like define genocide as a systematic and deliberate replacement of a people or ethnicity. And it is a two entities sort of thing, fighting it out sort of thing. And, you know, like I said before, white Australians are going to be a minority in 40 years, and I don't think that's right. And,
I'm sure actually a lot of my listeners would agree with what you're saying, because what you say and what you raise is exactly what people in Hong Kong are saying. But one thing that I want to add here is like I'm disturbed, and I'm very, I guess I'm actually quite emotional about this. I'm very disturbed and sorry that obviously what's happened in the past 20 years with Asian migration is that it's left a bitter taste in you, at least, and I think I can explain why. Because, for example, if you went to an Anzac ceremony or Remembrance Day ceremony, and you see a lot of Asians there, you know, just thanking Australians for what they've done for democracy that you know that's been offered to them, or if Australians are or if Asian Australians are more involved, you know, in Australian life generally and not clustering into their own groups, I'm sure you'd come up with a different conclusion. As I say, in terms of mainland Chinese people who migrate to Hong Kong, if they're better citizens, or if they
respect Hong Kong itself, values of Hong Kong, ways of life.
Rather, it's different for Hong Kong people because, you know,
and even if Hong Kong it's the same group, you know, exactly right, even, you know, when it's the same group, so, like, you know, even they're complaining. So imagine what Nick and people from his race group think. So
it's not a race. It's just an identity sort of thing.
I understand.
Because we're Europeans, but we see ourselves as Australians. I'm an Australian. I don't see myself as an Anglo-Russian. I'm an Aussie, you know. And that's a great thing that people can come here. And look, when my grandparents came here, Mum, there was no such thing as multiculturalism. And we've had Chinese and different, you know, ethnic
and that
groups
probably
in Australia
worked better because everybody just came together.
And people saw themselves as new Australians. And, you know, all those wogs that came here after the Second World War, if I could say that, which my grandparents and mum...
You can say it if it's friendly or if you're a wog yourself.
Absolutely, you know, and, you know, and they sort of like, you know, they were new Australians, they're on their way to becoming Australian, but multiculturalism about separation, and I have a lot of issues with multicultural, and I can't see the good that it's created sort of thing, but identity is important. We've all... you know, got a place in this planet sort of thing, and you know, we should be able to preserve our economic rights and our identity and our family and so forth. And that includes Australia too. We're not asking for too much,
Okay, well, I think that sounds very reasonable. So, Nick, thank you so much for joining us today. And I think I'll just have a quick... but you can pop in and say a few words, like, if you want. But I just want to, like, conclude, and Jeff can join me here. Right. But I think one of the things we got out of this interview is that I think it really says a lot about how, as immigrants, we need to behave
accordingly.
We need to behave. So if you're an Asian, regardless of where you come from, Hong Kong, China, Taiwan, or wherever, okay? Yeah. When you come to another country, you have to respect the laws and be thankful of what that place has given you. And this is exactly the same kind of expectations that Hong Kong people have from mainlanders who go and live there. Yep. So I think one of the things that have concerned Nick here today is that the Asian community has not tried its best to integrate into the community. And I think what he's also trying to say is, correct me if I'm wrong, is not necessarily the group's fault, but it's more of an issue of, you know, the government's and the multicultural policy saying, no, you can do whatever you want, it doesn't matter, you don't have to integrate, and if anybody forces you to integrate, that's racist. It's kind of like that issue. So I think this is
too much immigration too, you know, we can't just absorb, you know.
It takes time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it takes time. And I think there are a couple of ways that we probably might want to think about responding. So firstly, one thing that I really believe in, when you see behavior that you yourself don't accept. For example, when I see these, Chinese stores being opened up, to export stuff to China, when I see these things, I don't like it. When I go to Hurstville and I see people, driving erratically and people just crossing the roads wherever they want.
It's not only Hurstville, man. They're everywhere.
But when we see stuff like that,
they're everywhere.
I don't like it.
Yeah,
I don't like it. And I don't want the greater Australian community, particularly the mainstream Anglo community,
every Asian is
to
like
think
that.
I'm like that too. So what I should do is, and in fact this is what I have been doing, is that firstly I advocate and distance myself from it. That's the first step. So at least I'm doing this now. This is one step of me distancing. But also to be the people to point out the issues. I'll give you one example. Once I was in Hurstville, and there was this not old lady, she's in her 50s, but she just got some rubbish in her hand and just threw it on the ground. Just tossed it. Just tossed it. And I was just walking towards her and she was walking towards me. And in that split second, I was thinking, should I pull her up? Should I pull her up?
Well.
Now, and the reason is this, because most Chinese people, we don't want to cause a fuss. Like that's our culture. And I'm sure even if there was a white person who was walking down the street, like he wouldn't.
They would just like turn a blind eye and assume like that she speak English.
Yeah. But
some people probably react and go,
or they pretend they can't speak English.
Yeah. But what came through my mind was this: what if on the other side of the street Nick was there, or somebody who's a Western Anglo-Australian was there? If they saw this Asian lady throwing rubbish and this other Asian guy just walking past and not saying anything, what would they think? They would go, look,
come on.
All Asians don't care about rubbish, particularly we're in Hurstville. Why is there rubbish everywhere? It's because the Asians don't care. But if this person, I don't know whether or not there is this person, but if this person saw me picking her up and say, excuse me, you just chucked rubbish, which was what I did. Imagine, this person would have a different impression of Asian. You would have a positive. Absolutely. And I'm sure this is the kind of stuff you haven't seen enough. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's sort of like there's many issues, but that's sort of like, just one issue sort of thing. And I have noticed it, and I've seen people from all different backgrounds throw something, and I've said something, that's not right, pick it up, put it in the bin.
And they might just call you a racist. Well, I'm sure they will go, hey, white man racist. Last week I saw a white woman throw rubbish as well. But why doesn't he say her? He say her, but not he say me, but not her. Hey, racist! Because this is what they do.
To be called a racist, I take it as a badge of honor.
No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't, because that's not racist. So I really think what we've seen today is really a sign of how Asians and people, migrants who came to this country and people who are thankful of this country, it's a time for wake up. You need to see yourself as an Australian, and you need to put the interest of Australia first before your own racial group. Because I think even for this Chinese housing issue, even for a lot of people who might be victims of this,
a lot of them are just apathetic.
Apathetic, or say, no, I'm not going to support this because they said Chinese.
Because they're hurting like my country.
Yeah, because
they see that one as their country versus us being Australians.
That's true.
That's one of the main issues that amongst like Chinese people in Australia.
And I think a lot of the Chinese think it like it's their term. It's China's century. They're ascending, and we can do whatever we like. It's like what's happening in the Spratlys at the moment. No, nobody with their Asian neighbours. No, you can't tell us what to do. We'll do whatever we like, sort of thing.
So if you're a Chinese, but you think that you're part of this country, or you want to be an Australian, or you want to be recognised as an Australian and not have people say stuff against you, really the best way is to be Australian.
Yeah.
See, and when you see things like this, that's clearly hurting the country. Everything that we talked about, these are things that are harming the country. It's a fact. These are legal loopholes, and these are things that's harming the country. When we see things like this, we should call it out. It should, and I don't think Nick should be the one that should be calling this out, because, see, the thing is this: if he does it, he'd be called a racist. But when I do it, when Jeff does it, we won't be called racist, because obviously we're just calling out things for what they are.
Yep.
Like that Asian lady I was talking about who was chucking rubbish. It shouldn't be up to Nick or any white person to point this out. It should be up to another Asian to point it out.
Because the angle is kind of different if an Asian is telling off another Asian. Because
but it shouldn't be like that, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
We should be able to cross these sort of
we should,
but
then we should.
And the people that go for that racial argument all the time, it just shows me that they don't want to talk about the issues.
That's true.
Yeah. They just shut everyone off like by throwing our word.
We should, but for practical reasons, and also I guess for the community overall, like what you just said and like what you testified, you would see, like, you would have a better impression of Asians if you saw another Asian stopping this Asian lady from chucking rubbish. So clearly, it is the benefit of this whole community, of the Asian community, if Asians, instead of saying, oh no, I don't feel comfortable about this, I don't feel comfortable about them using this Asian, instead of waiting for other people to complain about this, instead of waiting the government policy to really clamp down on you, you should be the first people to raise up these issues.
Yep.
But especially the whole economic and social impact, and this thing with foreign ownership sort of thing, it's sort of like, like I can understand people want to come here, but when it's having a negative effect on the people here, well, that's wrong, and something needs to be done about it. And the Australian government is not going to do anything about it. They really aren't. So we're just going to keep campaigning on a cross range of issues sort of thing. And I really hope that the time is right, that a patriotic party can get in there and get some good compromise, you know, because we do need to. This Labor Liberal paradigm is just sort of it's boring. It's not doing the country any good.
Well, I don't agree with everything that you just said today, but it is such an honour to have you here with us today. And I think one thing for us to take home for all of our listeners today is that if you're an Australian citizen, your number one loyalty should be Australia, and particularly for me, because China never gave me a citizenship. China never gave me a citizenship, but Australia did. So my loyalty is for Australia. So I think if your loyalty is, if Australia is giving loyalty to you to give you citizenship and to believe in you as a citizen to vote on the future of this country, a right and privilege which I have, rather than another country that's never given you that right, or they've freaked you out so that you have to, or another country that hasn't given you this kind of loyalty, so you have to come to Australia, or you have to put your assets into Australia because you don't trust wherever you came from. I think you should also have your loyalty number one to Australia as well. So we hope you had hope you enjoyed the program, and we will see you next time.
Yep. Cheers.
Thank you.